Hi, and welcome to Drafting Compliance. I'm Kayne, he's Tom, and we talked with special guest Alexander Neff last time. Today, we're live at the Central District Brewing in Austin, Texas, and we're going to be talking about FedRAMP compliance with our special guest, Lisa Hall, CISO at Safebase. And because we're live, here's an interesting thing. Because we're live, we're going to take audience questions towards the end of tonight's taping, after Tom's at least finished 2 beers, because like I say, get it. Oh, I see 3.
Yeah,
okay.
Let's be honest. There's not going to be anything left in front of me by the time we're done. So.
You know what I really like is these are these little beers. I think I might be able to get through 1/8 of an inch of each. And speaking of that, before we get to the show, Lisa, we have some beers. What are we drinking today?
All right. I have this handy dandy list here that I certainly can read very easily. We have a Kayaker's Kolsch.
Nice. It's a nice Kolsch.
Excellent. A nice Kolsch. We also have Cosmic Whisper Hazy Session.
Ooh.
If you guys follow, which I don't
Hazy
expect anybody
session.
does, but those are my favorite. So
Those
I got
are
to pick the
favorite.
beer, by the way. So
We're just along for the ride.
that's right.
But I like the names, which is how I usually pick my beer, or by what it looks like on the bottle. So probably not an expert. Then we have Cloaked in Violet Crown, which sounds
It's a
appropriate.
sour.
I mean, I've had cocktails that come in this spectrum, so maybe I'm hopeful.
That sounds good. And then for our last final beer, we have Talk Show on Mute, West Coast.
West Coast IPA, which
Oh,
I
if,
he
should get
put
extra
it-
points
you like
for
the
reading
hop,
this.
you'll like that one.
He put in
For
an
sure.
IPA for me. This is going to be fire.
Well, there's actually 2 IPAs in here, Kane, because I love you.
Thanks, Tom. Love you
We
too.
should start with the Kolsch,
Let's start
though.
with the Kolsch. All right. So at this point, also, I will encourage the audience, if you have a Kolsch
I was too full.
or a beer of any, cheapies, and we're going to do tasting notes on these.
So this is a Kolsch, so it's going to be very light. It's not going to have much on the nose. So it's going to smell like an American beer smells, basically. But
This smells like teenage years of disappointment. This smells like underage drinking, Tom. Kind of tastes like it, too.
no, I think it actually has some sweet notes. It's definitely a little bready, so that's good if you like that. Not a lot of hop character, so you're not going to get overpowered by the hops. So those
Well,
who
that
like
is
light
true.
beers, I would encourage you to try the Kolsch. It's very good.
I mean, I will say this for it, Tom. It does taste like bread, and it's thankfully not stale, but like the place we went out for biscuits, I'd rather have that type of bread than this type of bread.
Yeah.
I definitely get the breadiness. Like I got some
Yeah,
of that.
we sense those grains in there.
All right.
It's
And
tasty. It's not too beery. You know, like
I'd say this is a very
Not too-
beery beer.
I don't know what that means, too beery.
I'd say it's quite
not
beery.
aggressively beer. Like
Okay.
it's light.
All right.
Oh, I think he's got some aggressive beers lined up for us. So let's test our second one. And at the end of the show, we'll also give our ratings. True fact, I've only ever given 1, and I've only given on a 10-point scale. I've never given it above a 4.
So
Tom,
we're digging
Lisa,
right in
what's
on
this
number
next,
2.
What's this
All right.
next one we got? It's got more
Cosmic Whisper.
It's got more of a head on it.
This is a New England IPA style, so it should be hazy, lots of character, some balance.
Oh, it's got a smell.
Oh yeah, you get the citrusy notes.
Yeah,
on
it's
it
kind
for
of got
sure.
some citrus to it, kind of some lemon to it. Are those Tom? You've been telling me grains of paradise. Is that what I'm smelling on this?
I think I smell like a mosaic hop, is what I would guess it is. But,
Okay, now we're getting into specific hops, and he's flexing. That's fun.
but
So specific.
To me, this smells like, the most delicious thing you can drink. So
This feels very summery. It is very citrus.
it is. It's creamy on the mouthfeel too.
Why do we do this?
So
Not a fan.
Kane loves this one.
Okay, I'm glad I brought up a water.
No, if you guys like hazy IPAs, by all means get this one. This is really, really good.
That is one of the worst things I think I mean, it's not as bad as the cinnamon sticky bun ale, but really, what is?
Yeah.
That is.
Sounds bad.
I prefer the smell of that. The taste is just disappointing.
Oh, I think that is all things good. So.
Well, that's
I don't
why
know,
we love one another so
we
well.
differ on that.
Lisa, how are you doing on the second beer, which was an IPA, I'm told?
I think this one's nice. It's refreshing. I would have again.
Okay, you'd have
Nice.
again. All right, well, we'll see how things are going. Tom, what is this? Is this like a kombucha or something, or a third one?
It's not like a kombucha.
Well, thank goodness for that.
That's a sour, which
Oh.
I don't think it's either one of our favorite kinds of beers. Certainly isn't mine. Maybe it's yours, Kane. I don't know. But these usually feel like they're not quite done fermenting to me.
It doesn't have much of a smell, which is hopefully a good sign.
It's sour. It's definitely
Smells sour.
If you like sour.
Maybe like a currant or something like that.
Okay, if I really go like get nose in, it's a bit raisiny, like a bit grapey.
That one's not my favorite.
I just got foam in my nose. Why?
You should assign like compliances to each of these and be
Yeah.
like, oh, that's FedRAMP.
This tastes like a difficult day, so it would be more like a FedRAMP maybe.
You know, I can taste it and smell it at the same time now, Tom.
You're supposed to do that.
I'm going to say it's not the most offensive sour I've ever had. I think it's pretty good.
So I would
bad.
encourage you to put your nose in there and get a good old
Yeah,
deep.
I did
get
smell
a
it.
deep, get a deep
I'm just a
sniff.
little more
I don't
careful
think I
than you.
should. This one's not my favorite.
It's not your jam, huh?
It's not my jam.
Are we just going all the way through?
I think we're going to try
who
all
needs
of them and
compliance
then
when
like
you have
yeah,
beer?
we'll see how they go, right? So I think that one was a bit fruity.
going?
And
Okay.
that wasn't actually as bad. Again, do not inhale it. Actually, I think that should be a
talk shows
general
on
rule for
mute.
beers to not inhale beer.
Yeah.
What's our fourth one, Tom?
This is a West Coast IPA, so
it's
these are generally
another
very hop
one.
forward, don't have the balance that a hazy IPA has on it. So if you really love your hop, this will be the beer for you.
Okay, you've already set my expectations.
You definitely smell the hop character.
I mean, I still smell the sour, Tom. Without a tissue, it's all I'm going to smell all night.
It's fine.
kind of almost a dank smell. I'm going to try it.
Oh. Yeah, that is definitely a double IPA.
Yeah, that one
is-
hits the hits you hard with the hop character.
Yeah, that's a lot of hops.
Kane likes it when I say this, but it leaves your tongue dry and invites you back for another taste.
Yes,
So,
I know exactly
yeah,
what another taste of is some more water, my friend. My goodness.
I have to try this one again because I forgot what it tasted like.
All right, well, we can keep drinking these throughout the show, but now we're going to actually talk about FedRAMP compliance now that we've at least started drinking. So, Lisa, before we came on stage this afternoon,
Yes, sir.
you were telling Tom and I a story about how you were working with FedRAMP compliance at a former company, and I want to start the show there. So can you walk us and the audience through the process of implementing FedRAMP in your former company, particularly some of the challenges, but also the successes you encountered?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I remember right, you had an agency sponsor. You didn't go the jab route, yeah?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the first things I would call out going through FedRAMP was agency route seems to be easier route, and also depending on who your agency sponsor is. So we had a very friendly agency sponsor who wanted to work with us to make it happen, and they had done this a few times already. So they had a team, and they were like, "We'll help you. We'll set you up with our team." And then, so we had the right resources. I think some of the challenges are, I think FedRAMP is it's the only compliance I ran into, whatever, I'm gonna keep drinking beer,
Framework, whatever.
that I ran into that you also have to enforce on your sub-processors.
Oh.
And so that was one of the biggest challenges because not everybody was there yet. And so deciding we could either host on-prem, which we did for some, and then some others, it was just a whole nother ordeal of y'all have to get FedRAMP authorized or we got to do something else.
Yeah, you got to go a different direction. Certainly, when you think about what FedRAMP is intending to do, right? It's for cloud solutions. So I get a little bit reticent to want to use a product where I can only do it on-prem anyway.
Yeah.
That tells me that they're not taking security particularly serious. Your point about the jab, that's a good point. The jab, I always think of it as sort of like you're dealing with the Death Star police or something. They're going to be very, very difficult to work with.
Yes.
They're going to hold you to standards that may not even be reasonable for the business that you're in.
Yes.
Where you'll find some more leniency with agencies. So if anybody out there is even thinking about it, I would challenge you to definitely be careful about that decision. You're going to want to use an agency sponsor most of the time. If you're thinking you're going to go after some three-letter agencies, maybe you'll go jab in that regard. Or if you're just so replete with resources that you can spend millions of dollars on the process,
Yes.
knock yourself out. Go after the jab. But
Well,
otherwise, I think the agency sponsor way.
And I think,
is the way.
Tom, an important point to bring up is it's not just this like having an agency sponsor. It's choosing an agency sponsor that's been to this rodeo before and is committed to getting companies through the process. And I think a lot of the reason we've got, I think it's like 27,000 SaaS vendors in the world right now, and there's only 338 that are actually FedRAMP authorized, whether that's moderate or high. I think that's a challenge where a lot of folks have just decided to either take the jab route and not realize the risks there, or alternatively, they've chosen an agency sponsor that's immature in their processes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly a risk, especially if you want to eventually pursue reciprocity on your agency sponsorship and provide service to other agencies. They're going to know who's done the due diligence, even in the government, and they're going to come back to you potentially with a newer, higher level that you need to hit. And essentially, you're going to restart your FedRAMP program at that point. So there's definitely a nuance there. And then I should at least plug the idea that there's a lot of chatter right now in the federal government for companies like Hyperproof and probably like Safebase that maybe we should have an agentless, a sponsorless approval process, so we can go get ATOs much easier without all of the sort of rigmarole that the government puts you through. They've talked about this now really in earnest for the last 8 months. There's been 2 memos put out there. I encourage you guys, if you need something to read in the bathroom, to take that with you. But the reality is they're pushing at the high levels of the government to find easier ways for younger, innovative companies that are not looking to necessarily do work directly with the federal government. They're looking for ways for you to get your ATO that doesn't include that. So
yeah, and what Tom's talking about there is there was a federal memorandum that came out from the White House mid-July, I'd say, about changing FedRAMP program to really modernize it to help companies get through a lot faster rather than our current rate, because they've realized it is too difficult right now. And so like if you're considering doing FedRAMP, and I think Tom, you want to weigh in on this, and maybe Lisa as well, like they're right now asking for input on the metrics that they're going to use to define success of their program changes, rather than hoping that they got it right. They're actually asking vendors by the end of August for feedback about, did we get our KPIs right? Like, is this a meaningful measure of progress, or are we just perpetuating more of this, interminable cycle of difficulty to get through to FedRAMP? Tom, you've read that memo, and I think, Lisa, you've read it as well.
I've read the memo, and I'm
possibly in the bathroom, as you say.
I'm almost embarrassed to admit it, but I've read both of the memos. They're not particularly riveting documents, but I would, if you're the kind of geek that I am, I'd encourage you guys to go out, read it, and certainly comment on it. It's the comments that will help shape some of the direction. So.
All right, well, we're going to move to our second topic of the night, which is around how FedRAMP compares to other cybersecurity frameworks, because that's not the only one in the world, it turns out. Even though if you're doing FedRAMP, it might seem like it's the only one in the world. So Lisa, in your opinion, how does FedRAMP stack up against other cybersecurity frameworks like, I don't know, NIST, CSF, or ISO 27001, both in terms of complexity, but also effectiveness for an organization?
I would have to say FedRAMP is probably more complex and the controls are a little more particular than some of the other compliances, where you just have to meet the spirit of the control, where FedRAMP will be very nope, you need FIPS. You need this level of this exact thing.
Now, do you mean FIPS validated or certified?
You need FIPS validated.
And I hate that we have to memorize that stuff.
I know, but it's that specific, where a lot of other controls, you can just say, it says you have to encrypt data in transit, and they're not saying, oh, it has to be like mutual TLS or IPsec, right? It's like it's just, we don't care if it's internal to your network. So it does get very specific. I think the other thing that FedRAMP I would have a comparison with ISO is that you can have some outstanding things that you're working on, and that's okay, like the POAMs. But again, it's if you're working with your agency and they accept that. Otherwise, you're going to be remediating forever and ever until that time.
I would say in general, when you're with FedRAMP, you're going to be remediating forever and ever. I mean, the idea that you're ever finished from an information security perspective underneath FedRAMP is, you should just dispel that myth altogether. You're going to be underneath a level of diligence that you probably are not used to and will be very uncomfortable to you.
Yes.
Just the cadence of continuous monitoring that's required. That's a monthly requirement. You have huge report out that has to occur, and if you're not staying on top of it, you are going to lose your ATO. So the level of complexity doesn't end at the control implementation. It really sort of begins after control implementation in the terms of the burden of monitoring.
Yeah, that's a great point, that it does have to be monthly monitoring, where you have other things like ISO or SOC that's annual or semi-annual for ISO. It's like just check-ins, literally, not
right.
Quite different.
So, yes, SOC 2 is like compliance light, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that in a bit.
Okay, I'll save my thoughts.
Lisa
for
has
later.
some strong feels about SOC 2 Type 2.
Very
but
kind feelings. Very happy feelings.
Fair enough. We'll see how that goes. But what I was going to say, Tom, something also that comes through in FedRAMP, and thinking about both of your comments, it's inferred that there is a resource requirement. You both talked about the challenges of continuous monitoring and how that's not part of a normal, like an ISO or a NIST CSF, not to the level of FedRAMP. Is that something organizations should be considering, like when they're trying to determine if they have a existing framework that maps well to FedRAMP, if they have that level of just people to operate the controls?
You want me to take that?
I'll take that.
Okay.
Before we did FedRAMP, I wrote a business case. First of all, I wanted our sales team to tell me that we were going to make money off of FedRAMP before we did it, because it started turning into one of those things that was just getting thrown over the fence to security, like, oh, people are saying FedRAMP, we got to do it. So I wanted the actual data, and then I did a cost analysis of what I thought it would take to like do some of the remediations. I did just a self-review of the controls at like SAS Lite, I think, or like the babyest version. And then I pretty much made a requirement that I would get to hire a federal program manager. And that it was a no-go without that, because otherwise it would have been me. And I was not prepared to do that. And it actually was making a good hire is really important, because I was able to hire someone who was already working in that space. So it's a small ass world. Like they all know each other. And so he's like, oh, I'm the person that was working on vulnerability management remediations. I'm like, oh, you already know all the people there. That's really helpful, because you know how to talk to get things done. And I'm just like, this is my first go around, you know?
Yeah, and it really isn't like a single person job, right? So you've got to find a team. You've got to build your team out based on the skills that you need, certainly reflecting in FedRAMP. If you're going into FedRAMP thinking, well, I've done ISO and I've done SOC 2, this is going to be easy, you're going to be disappointed.
Very disappointed.
While almost all of those controls will map in some way or another, it's really just sort of like the foundational level. It's FedRAMP has such a much higher level of scrutiny that you're going to end up revisiting controls that you thought were great with SOC 2 or ISO and upping the maturity in the game around it. So,
yes.
Don't walk into this naive. Also understand that you're going to likely have to educate your organization on what FedRAMP means and the level of commitment it is going to take from that organization to get it. It is not something that will only happen in like the low levels, the dark corners of compliance. It will impact the organization holistically.
Yes. I will just add to that, you're probably going to end up spending a lot more money than you planned, and it's probably going to take longer than you planned. So when you're like, we're going to get this done in 3 years for $2 million, just think it's probably going to be 5, and it's probably going to be double the budget.
But I do think you're right in making a business case for it and really informing the business of the challenges proactively, rather than wandering in and hoping for the best. Well, I want to pivot to something from our earlier conversation today, Lisa. So earlier today, Lisa was on a podcast that I do, InfoSec Pros, and we were talking about how, I'm going to paraphrase, but it was about how frameworks should really reflect what companies are already doing, rather than just, either having a paper tiger that you cannot demonstrate, or just doing checkbox compliance. And so my question then would be how you think that compliance frameworks, including FedRAMP, should reflect what companies are already doing in terms of their cybersecurity and their risk management practices.
I think I'm fully in the camp of the compliance should be reflecting the security you're doing, and it should not be a check mark. It should almost be a natural outcome. Sometimes that just means, we have to mature this one area more to reach this, but it shouldn't just be we're only doing this. Your why shouldn't be for this compliance thing. Your why is, because we have sensitive data here that we want to protect, and that's why it's actually important to do this. there should be very few times, maybe if you're doing high trust, that you have to say, we're just doing this because they're making us. But generally, there should be a why. And you should, as CISO or as GRC, as security professionals, we should be able to explain what that why is. And without that...
I agree completely. I mean, we all live in a compliance world, and we know the requirements that are put upon us, and we know we have to please our auditors. But if you're walking into compliance and thinking that's the end of your journey, you're doing it wrong. You should be thinking as compliance is a checkpoint on your way to best practice, and you should understand what best practice means to your business, because it certainly will be different business to business, but you cannot think that compliance is the best practice. It's never going to be.
All right, and I'll say this. If you're
Cheers
enjoying
to
the
that.
show on YouTube, ring the bell to get notifications about my quest to find any beer. I've got 4 of them in front of me here. Like, find any beer that is actually drinkable and add this to your podcast to make this part of your weekly or your monthly routine. Next, I want to pivot to the topic of frameworks and checkbox compliance, and I kind of alluded to that in my prior question. So, Tom, I'm going to go to you first instead of Lisa. I want to hear you on that and Lisa on this. Why you think it's important for companies to actually follow frameworks rather than just checking boxes, and how that mindset influences security culture, especially for a security operations team?
That's a big question. I mean, obviously, when you think about a framework will give you some of the nuance associated with any given control. So most frameworks do give you the ability to live within the business structure that you have. That's really important, and that's, to me, implementing the framework, keeping that lens on. And the one place this differs is FedRAMP, unfortunately, but for most frameworks, keeping the lens of your business on it at the same time as implementing is really important. You're then implementing your best practice rather than just your checkbox. And let's be honest, most of these frameworks are now being looked at as authoritative, and because they're being looked at as authoritative, they're getting updated much more regularly than they used to be. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when COVID was what everybody was following, right? And it was static and stale. They're now much more adaptive to what is changing in the market. So you're already starting to see requests for comments around like things like AI, and we're starting to flesh out what our best practices are around that. And certainly all of those things, if you follow most of these frameworks, are informed by your own security teams. Your best technical people are putting comments out there that these frameworks are reading, understanding, and starting to implement into their own best practices. So not only does frameworks inform your security team on what they need to do, but your security team, the best ones out there, are helping shape the direction those frameworks should go as well.
Yes. I love that you mentioned that, because I think oftentimes as like GRC compliance folks, we feel helpless and like we just have to follow these things and we can't do anything about it. But we can get involved and give feedback and, help curate what helpful feedback that most folks want to hear. So I agree.
100%. And if we bring this back around to FedRAMP, there's actually been multiple opportunities to help inform the FedRAMP program from a user-based perspective. So I've given my comments. I would encourage anybody else who goes to FedRAMP to make sure you're getting your voice heard, because the last thing we really want is information security to be completely roadmapped by people who sit in an office in the federal government somewhere.
Yes. It's like voting. Go vote. Nicely said.
All right, so because we're at ISACA GRC as well, I'm guessing we have a number of auditors in the audience. Just a quick show of hands here. If you're an auditor or doing assessments, let's see some hands up there.
What about reformed auditors? Reformed auditors.
Okay, cool. Auditors, yeah.
Dean
Love
in
that.
the back.
Okay, we'll
I'm about to
clean
call
up our
out people
comments
I know.
completely now. So.
Well, I'm thinking just for our auditors more than anything else.
Oh no, are they all leaving now?
At the minute you said audit, runaway auditors.
We made them uncomfortable.
I'm hungry too. I'm right behind you.
Thanks for joining.
And actually, the question here is about being comfortable when talking to auditors, which is where I wanted to identify how many auditors we have in the organization. Like, what are the factors that make you feel comfortable or make your organization feel comfortable when you're getting ready to talk to an auditor for that big audit? Like, what are the things that we should be looking at if we're not an auditor and we're going to talk to them, although they just all ran away for a group photo?
Oh.
Go
I was
ahead.
like, huh, what? So like donuts and brownies is the first step. You like always show up with goodies. No, it doesn't like hurt anything. It's fine. No, I think part of it is being able to understand the spirit of the control, honestly. And we all should be on the same page with our auditor about, look, I know what you're trying to do here, and here's how we meet it. And I ran into this a lot, during the move to the cloud, because I'm old as dirt. And so it was all talking to auditors who are traditionally like in data centers, and I've had my fair share of tours in data centers. And then explaining why certain things don't happen the same way now because we're like in the cloud and it's a little different. And usually if you can explain like why and what you're doing, and sometimes it's better. 100%. We did disaster recovery at a company I worked at, and instead of doing annual disaster recovery tests, we just did fail Fridays. All the time. We're just breaking production. And when an auditor was asking me about disaster recovery tests, I was like, yes, annually, but look at this cool shit we're doing. It's way better than the thing that you're asking for.
And your organization has a higher degree of confidence that they're going to survive a disaster.
Yes.
You raised disasters. I want to go there next. But Tom, let's hear your experience in talking to auditors.
I have a couple comments around auditors. First is make sure you're partnering with an audit firm that is appropriate for what you're getting audited against. Don't go and use the financial auditor that your company already has approved through your vendor process. Go and find the appropriate auditor. I can't tell you the number of companies I've gone to when I consulted, and their problem they thought was a security problem was really an auditor problem. So be conscious of that. It's real. Second thing is I don't have adversarial relationships with auditors. I have partnership relationship with my auditors. And almost universally, I can tell you that those folks have become a partner in making sure that what I believe we're getting done, we're actually getting done. There's always going to be areas where you have to explain or maybe bring your auditor along on a journey to get them to the point where they understand. But if you've built that kind of relationship with your auditor, you'll be able to do that. If you haven't, if you've built an adversarial relationship with your auditor, you're going to have a very difficult time helping them understand where maybe you've innovated and they haven't seen that before.
Yeah.
So the other thing I'd say with auditors, and this is one of those less or appreciated techniques, is when you answer their question, and I used to teach people how to respond to an auditor, like you answer their question, then you stop. And I have met so many junior personnel who end up blowing their audit findings because nature abhors a vacuum, and the auditor is just taking notes. Like they're trying to get their day job done. Like they do not need you jammering on about whatever. And unfortunately, that can actually affect audit results almost uniformly negatively by either saying too much or by saying something unrelated, so it's not captured adequately in the results. Tom, you're laughing. Have you done this before?
I've seen that so many times. I used to teach lunch and learns before every audit with the team that I knew would have to go and talk to their auditors, because everybody, to your point, when they start talking, they almost start doing run-on talking. And I'm always like, answer the question, but don't answer any other question that you know might arise from that. And that's a skill that has to be practiced. It's not necessarily innate.
Yeah, I always did auditor like training for whoever was going to be interviewed for that exact thing. You never say yes and blah 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 blah. You're like, yep. let bring me the next question. But I think it takes that to have a successful audit.
Yeah, being succinct, and really that matters because I'm seeing the smart audit firms these days are asking to have the person who's operating the controls, not their manager, not their director, not the person who's going to coach them through the audit, but rather to get the ground truth, which I do think is a positive development in the space.
Yeah.
Now, Lisa, you were talking about disasters just recently, and I want to throw in a bonus question here.
All right.
Before we get to our audience questions, I do want to bring in a bonus question. CrowdStrike had a bit of a thing. They actually received the Pony Awards in DEF CON this year for their thing. They had a bit of an IT meltdown, let's call it. And what I want to ask is, because I think we've covered why it happened, how it happened, what are the real big takeaways for compliance professionals and the broader cybersecurity community that we can learn from the IT meltdown of CrowdStrike?
Want me to go first? Well, I think it can happen to anyone, first of all. So having a little empathy when this does happen goes a long way. And I do appreciate how everyone came together as a community to kind of work together. I think it kind of goes back to we should be doing the things we say we do. And so if we have controls that say we, test our software before we roll out new versions, or maybe supply risk, your vendor risk management. So if we say we do these things, just ensuring that we really do. And unfortunately, times like this give us that why. This is why it's important, because shit happens and you may be okay and maybe nothing happens. And then all of a sudden tomorrow you're popped. And that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot about CrowdStrike that should make us angry. Anytime you have a critical piece of your security infrastructure, you should have the right to expect that they do regression testing and things like that, and you should expect that they aren't pushing it out to the world all at the same time. So that should make you angry, but it should also inform your vendor management program. You should be talking internally right now about what that meant in terms of all of your vendors. Do we now know of a risk that we should apply to a bunch of vendors because they're all pushing updates into your environment without a lot of control from you? And do you have appropriate mitigation and testing strategies yourself around that? And I think it's appropriate at this point that we also nod that there's a lot of other vendors in the last 5 years that have had some sort of issue that has impacted your enterprise. This is just another one that isn't necessarily an information security issue. It was a software update issue, but the impacts are very similar in terms of bringing your environments down. So we should start demanding from our vendors to be better, and we should start to measure them against that new standard that we expect.
I want to go in a slightly different direction or related direction to you, Tom, there. And I think that the conversation that the CISO, the CFO, and maybe chief counsel should be having is a risk exercise, especially at publicly traded companies. Because what I'm expecting is that a number of companies are going to have to file that they have a basic ITGC, IT General Controls failure, because they cannot prove that they are doing a structured patch rollout or a structured software rollout if they're running EDR, XDR, MDR, whatever it is. And the conversation now is a risk trade-off. Is it more likely that there will be another IT outage by a vendor like CrowdStrike because of a faulty update? Or is it more likely by turning off those automated updates that you're going to get shelled by a nation state? But I think that has to be a conscientious conversation because investors are going to be pushing on this question now.
Yeah, there's definitely financial impacts. We're going to have to see what it means to CrowdStrike, but I certainly think we're going to see something different out of CrowdStrike going forward.
All right, well, with that, I see, Tom, you ran out of beer, at least 2 of your beers.
I'm not out of beer. I'm
you're not
low on.
completely.
That must not be your favorite.
How about this? How about we move to our beer review section of the show? We'll give the audience our thoughts on the beer, and then we'll get some audience questions in here. Tom, the first one was a Kolsch, right?
I love the Kolsch.
All right,
yes.
And just as a reminder for everyone, we do a 10-point scale where 1 is I'm going to be sick after, and 10 is something that does not exist. So, Lisa, let's go with you first on the Kolsch.
Mine, you can tell by how much I've had of each of them. Wait, which one's good? 10 or what?
The Kolsch is the first one.
Yeah. What's my rating scale? Is one
1
good
to
or
10.
bad?
1 to 10.
Okay. I don't know. It's the first time I'm rating. I would give him like an 8.
Nice.
An 8.
I would have it again.
Damn.
Yeah.
Big numbers.
So I always am informing my grades by what I like. So I really like hoppy beer. So those are always going to get higher grades for me. But this Kolsch was extremely sessionable. It was easy drinking. It was light. It's perfect for these hot Austin days, which I don't really like at all. So I will rate this very high. I would give it like a 6.5, only because it isn't hoppy. If it was hoppy, I would give it even more.
So I'm going to give that a 2. I just had another sip, and I would say this does not do well with oxidation. Like if you leave that set, like maybe you're supposed to just pound these like shotgun them. Maybe that works, but if you leave this thing set, it tastes like skunk. It is that is just foul. So I'm going
no
a 2
warm
on that
beer.
one.
All right, we have
All
a
right.
nice, we had a nice mix.
We got
on
a
this.
spread.
Yeah.
Okay, what's our second beer we had here? This was one
The
of those
second one is
IPAs,
the
wasn't it?
Cosmic Whisper. It's a hazy, sessionable IPA.
Oh yeah,
a
it's the
New
thing you
England
can't
IPA.
see through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've saved some of this because it was my favorite.
I saved some of this for a different reason.
Yeah. I bet you did. All right.
All right.
What's your opinion
Let's go,
of it?
Lisa, first.
I like this one. This one is like spring. It tastes like spring. I would say maybe like a 6 or a 7.
Nice. This is my favorite style of beer by far. I love the balance. I love the hop character. This is got a nice haze to it, which I think is a good character in these beers. These are the kind of beers I have like 3 or 4 in my refrigerator all year long. So I'm going to give this an 8. I think it's great.
All right, so I just had another sip of that. I can say it's aged better in the open air than the first one has. I still like the citrus notes on the nose. It's a little less assertive if you let it sit out for a half hour, apparently. I'm going to give it a 3 because I can't give it a 2.5. But when I think of what I'm
3.
comparing against, I'm damning with faint praise.
All right.
And just as an interesting point, Lisa is not a beer drinker. She told me this before we started taping tonight. She's not a beer drinker. So the fact that she's given an 8 already, I'm amazed by that. Tom, you may have a convert here.
You've come a long way.
Yeah.
All right. Now, what is our third beer, Tom? This is this weird thing that looks like it should be a tiki drink.
So I drank all of that.
Okay, wow.
I did it for 2 reasons. One, I don't like to leave things undrank. It was not my favorite, so I wanted to eliminate it quicker. But I still liked it. In terms of a sour, I thought it was very good. So I would probably give it a 5, which for me on a sour, I don't ever drink them or stock them. That's a pretty good rating.
All right. And Lisa, where do you come in on the sour? I think if we were to actually compare who's had more.
Did Kane drink more?
He
Kane
drank
more.
more.
So I
than I
accidentally
did.
inhaled part of this, if you remember at the beginning of the episode. It was terrible.
So I just don't like sour in general. Like if you ask anyone that knows me, I'm not like, oh, Sour Patch Kids, great.
Ooh, yuck.
So I think it's just the sourness. I'm like, no, thank you. Do not like. I rate it a 2. But purely
yeah.
because if you like sour, it's probably hecka good. Like drink it all.
Oh. Yeah, big shout out to my friend Cody, who took me to Hood River and made me drink sours for 2 days. Like, we tried 30 different beers. This is as bad as some of them. This is definitely another 2. Although I will say it has aged and tastes a little more like raspberry. Like, there is a fruit profile that comes. No, you good luck.
I didn't let mine age.
No, you apparently did not. You got to let it age like fine wine, Tom. Speaking of fine wine, what is our fourth one? It's almost like a barley wine,
So,
right?
yeah,
This is a double
the fourth
IPA?
one is the West Coast IPA. Talk shows on mute. Very hop forward. Very kind of characteristic of the West Coast style. What do you think, Lisa?
I like this one. Yeah, this tastes like beer I've had before. Very familiar. I would probably say this is like maybe a 7.
Oh, I think we're going to align really close on this.
Okay.
I like this style. I just don't like it quite as much as I like the hazy.
Yeah.
This is something I think of when I don't want to drink more than one, but I still want that hop character. So I drink this style. I'm gonna give this a 7 as well. It's just not. It doesn't have the
Excellent.
pull that the hazy had.
So I'm going to be poetic on this one because I took a couple sniffs here, and it's summer. I'm in the West Coast. We don't have air conditioning. This smell reminds me of a cat's litter box on a hot summer day. As Tom drains his. I am going to go in for one more just to see how it is, but
That actually, as it sits, gets better. I think.
No,
too.
I think so too.
Yeah, that's.
I think you agree.
We're just another
Okay.
2 here on this one. You and
Yeah.
I are not going to see eye to eye about West Coast IPAs. All right, so with that, I want to thank everyone for attending and for Lisa and Tom's insights on drafting compliance.